The earth is my home. I promise to keep it healthy and beautiful. I will love the land, the air, the water, and all living creatures. I will be a defender of my planet, united with friends. I will save the...
My name is Commissioner Frank Avila, and I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And the name of our show today is Don't Frack Illinois.
That's correct.
And again, Don't Frack Illinois. And as my guest, I have Dr. Lora Chamberlain,
Hello.
and she represents the group that is called Illinois Coalition for a Moratorium on Fracking. Glad to be on our show, Lora.
Yes, thank you very much for having me, Frank.
You know, there's been a lot of discussion on fracking. And who is the Illinois Coalition for a Moratorium on Fracking? Who are they?
We are a number of grassroots organizations across the state, including SAFE, Southern Illinoisans Against Fracturing Our Environment, MoveOn.org in Illinois, PDA Illinois, Citizens Act to Protect Our Water. I have to actually look at the whole list myself. Southeast Environmental Task Force, Stop the Frack Attack, the Gray Panthers, the Chicago chapter of World Can't Wait, Illinois Citizens for Clean Air and Water. So a number of grassroots organizations around the state. And we're partnering with Illinois People's Action, Environment Illinois, Food and Water Watch, and Sierra Club on promoting a moratorium on fracking here in the General Assembly in Illinois.
You know, fracking, a lot of people are concerned about paying the rent, buying food for their kids, going to work, and very few people might not even know what fracking is.
Absolutely.
What is fracking?
Absolutely. I've got a chart here for you, for your listeners. So fracking is a very dangerous method of natural gas extraction. And they drill down up to a mile into the ground, and they can drill horizontally up to, they can drill actually up to 10 miles, but most often 1 to 2 miles horizontally. And they take over millions of gallons, definitely over 1 million a gallon, and it goes up to about 1 million gallons. Each time they frack a well, and they mix it with sand and a number of very carcinogenic and very dangerous chemicals. And they put it under really, really high pressure down this very long, vertical and then horizontal drilling, the well, and they put it under really high pressure to fracture the shale rock. So they're basically blowing out the bedrock of our communities. And they're doing this across the U.S. in rural communities, and it's altering the face of their communities very significantly. So I'm here to tell people what's in store for Illinois if we let them go forward.
And and the problem I see is that water. A human being has 67% water in his body. A chicken, an elephant, 67%. So water is very precious. Right. Here we're in the Midwest. We have the Lake Michigan, and so here they're using water, which is very precious. And where does that water come from? The groundwater.
That's exactly right.
So you're saying that they're depleting the groundwater?
Yes, I have to kind of go into the numbers just a little bit here, okay, for Illinois, because I want to make this very Illinois specific.
Okay.
So they're fracking for natural gas and oil in Illinois, and both of them are very water consumptive. And what they can use, like I said, they can use up 1 million to up to 21 million times each time they frack a well.
Oh my God.
We anticipate they're going to be drilling about 10,000 wells in Illinois, and they can frack each well up to about 18 times.
18 times?
So this is literally over 1 trillion gallons of water they're going to take, and they're going to poison, and they're going to shove it down underground, and it'll be lost to the hydrological cycle. This is absolutely absurd in a state that is in the middle of a drought. We are in almost a semi-permanent drought, and we lost 1/3 of our crops last year to drought. And we cannot afford this level of water usage in an agricultural state.
Well, not only that, is that here in Illinois we have ethanol, which they use water to make, I don't know, 5 times as much water to make 1 gallon of ethanol. So the ethanol is depleting our groundwater. So now they want to come and frack and also deplete our groundwater. Is there any way, are they doing any way to recycle that water to make it drinkable or anything?
Right.
Are they doing that?
So this whole fracking came about in about 2005. Vice President Cheney exempted fracking from a number of federal environmental legislation, like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, and a number of Superfund Act. Pretty much all the federal legislation, fracking was exempted. So that should tell you right off the very bat that there's something very, very toxic and very dangerous about this. Okay, so the industry has started up in full gear around after 2005 into 2007, started really kind of dropping a lot of wells in Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. And they got pushback because they were using the water so egregiously. And some of the aquifers have definitely been contaminated by this level of industrialization. And also some of the aquifers are going dry, like the Bakken oil field in North Dakota. They're sucking that aquifer very, very seriously drier. And they anticipate that that aquifer might be empty by 2030. 2030? From all of the... But Frank, I think you need to understand and really see what we're talking about. This is a picture of the Bakken oil field. So this is about 100 miles area. Yes. And so every little, tiny little section is about 5 miles, okay? So this is what we're talking about, this level of intensity. It is just thousands of frack wells. And around each single one, so every one of these wells is taking millions of gallons of water each time they frack it. And they can frack it up to 18 times, and then some of the water comes back. They can reuse some of it, but after a little while, it has to go because it's very, very seriously toxic and radioactive. Now, is there any treatment plants to treat that water? Okay, so this is the situation. In Pennsylvania, when they started this, the industry was dropping this toxic radioactive wastewater, which, when it goes down, okay, it immediately flows back, and it's not as toxic initially in the first couple days, but then it becomes very, very toxic, very salty, and very, it brings up arsenic and barium. It has radioactivity, radium. And it can be very seriously radioactive, like 1,000 times background, 2,000 times background. So they were dropping this stuff off at city wastewater treatment plants that are not at all prepared to deal with that kind of level of toxicity and radioactivity. And so we think that they contaminated many Pennsylvania streams and lakes because the treatment plants were not able to do it. So there's no rule to stop them from sending it to the treatment plant, because there should have been some regulation that, look, before you give it to the wastewater treatment plant, you have to remove all that at your cost. Well, here's the situation, is some of the states started clamping down because that clearly was going to be very, very dangerous for the people. So so one of the things that they do is that they reuse. So this really toxic water comes back up, and they reuse it. They hold it in enclosed trucks and containers, and they reuse it. They reuse it, they reuse it, so it becomes more and more and more toxic. And one of the things that we think is happening is that the workers on these sites are not being protected at all. They're not wearing appropriate respiratory gear, like actual respirators, and they're not wearing dosimeters that would monitor how much radioactive activity that they're being exposed to. We think that this is criminal, what's going on. Okay, the purpose of fracking, why do they want to frack? For the fuel, that and also the jobs. Right. So are they creating the jobs that and they anticipate here in Illinois, and would they have enough fuel that they're getting out of breaking up this these rocks
Is there enough?
Okay, exactly. What's going on here?
Yeah, what's going on?
So we reached peak oil, and our gas production diminished greatly.
Yes.
Okay, over the course of the 60s, 70s, and 80s,
yes.
and we're scraping at the bottom of the barrel now. That's what this is we're scraping at the bottom of the barrel. And Professor Ingrafia from Cornell University was in Northwestern about a week ago, and was talking about how some of these fields are being played out in 5 years.
5 years?
6 years, 7 years. He thinks max we have 20 years.
20 years?
In the entire U.S.
So they're going to destroy the environment for a 5 or 10 year of getting all this fuel out of the ground.
That's exactly right.
They're going to contaminate our environment.
Right,
They're going to deplete our water just for a 5 or 10 year extracting all this fuel. And
He anticipates 20 years is about, we'll have had it.
Now,
we will be out.
Now, what's the reading here in Illinois?
Okay, so they think that we have about 4 billion barrels of oil.
4 billion?
4 billion in the small cracks, nooks and crannies of the
And that's in the
shale.
southern part of Illinois?
It is in the southeastern part. I'm going to hold up another map. Okay. It's the southeastern part and also the central part of Illinois. And here is a map of the oil fields, and mostly what you see is in the southeastern part of Illinois. There's quite a bit, and this is the so this is the shale that might hold the oil. That might hold the oil. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be produced. Okay. Now I want to hold up another map right after that, and this is the map of the New Madrid and the Wabash fault lines. These are the two of the most unstable fault lines in the country. And the Wabash goes south from Illinois, the New Madrid goes south from Illinois, and the Wabash is right along the southeastern border of Illinois, right where the oil is. Right where the oil is. The Illinois Geologic Survey openly admits that they don't have the sub-fault lines mapped out from all of these. And fracking and the disposal of all this wastewater that's coming up are causing earthquakes. It's documented by the geologists. A 5.7 was caused in Oklahoma in 2011, and in New Mexico also a 5.5, I think it was 5.6 or 5.5, was caused by the massive amounts of water, toxic radioactive wastewater that they're shoving down these what's called Class 2 injection wells. And they're doing it under such pressure that they're actually causing earthquakes. And in Oklahoma, they caused an earthquake in an area where the earthquake fault line was dormant. Our fault lines in Illinois are absolutely the most active in the country, east of the Rockies. And that's right where they want to frack. That's right where they want to frack. We are really sounding the alarm on this because we think that that's a very dangerous procedure. Germany has outlawed it in any active earthquake zone, and so has California.
Well, the European countries, they do more to protect the environment and the public than what we do here in the United States.
That's exactly right.
They do more. Now, there was an article that I saw where the U.S. EPA came out with a little report saying about fracking. I didn't read the whole article.
Right.
But it came out today, I think.
Right. So the EPA issues reports every year about the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. One of the things about fracking, all these wells, all of these wells, okay, many of them are leaking. Many of them are leaking. 5% will leak right away. 5 to 6%
and they're
will leak
leaking into the groundwater.
And they're leaking methane right into the groundwater, right into the air. It's coming up. And we think that in 15 years, 50 to 60% of these will be leaking. And we think that eventually 100% of these wells will be leaking methane. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, and it's about 33 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. So many of the climate scientists have been very concerned about this massive increase in the number of wells that has gone on in this country. There's been a exponential rise in the number of wells. There's thousands of wells in Pennsylvania. They think that the Marcellus Shale alone in Pennsylvania and New York will have eventually 200,000 wells in it. So we're talking really hundreds of thousands of wells dropped.
And using each well over 1 million to 2 million gallons of water.
Right, and each well is leaking methane.
Yeah.
Each well eventually will leak methane. So how much methane is being leaked? That's a big question, okay? And NOAA and the University of Colorado did a study.
And NOAA, what is National
Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Association, right? And they did a study, and they found that they went out and they were monitoring some of these wells, how much methane is leaking, and they found that some of the wells are leaking 4 to 9% methane, and to break even for natural gas. Frack gas to be as clean as coal or as dirty as coal, okay, then the wells cannot be leaking more than about 3%.
3%.
Okay.
Now, how do they monitor if it's
right,
leaking?
they go and they have methane detectors. They have methane detectors. So Professor Ingrafia, the director of the Cornell Fracture Group, also had a paper out about how much these wells are leaking, and he's now taken to go into a plane. He's going to be publishing a paper in Science magazine this month about quantifying how much methane is being leaked. So he flew over Pennsylvania and he did some monitoring. That EPA report that you're talking about, they didn't actually monitor anything. They didn't go out and do any on-the-ground research. They took industry reports.
Industry report.
Industry reports. And we all know that the oil and natural gas industry is such a honest and forthright industry. So they took industry reports and they figured out that the methane release from these wells was not as bad as we thought, okay? But they still didn't really even quantify it. And they say, openly, they say that the number 2 cause of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. is the natural gas and oil industry. That's it. They're already the number 2. So this was just a little smidgen, but Bill McKibben from 350.org and the other scientists that have actually gone out and measured this, they have said point blank that the EPA would be wise to use actual measurements and that their funny science should be looked at by an independent board.
And what Dr. Chamberlain has mentioned, that U.S. EPA, that's the United States Environmental Protection Agency, which is supposed to protect the public.
Right. And that's the federal.
And you're saying in their report, they're not protecting the public because they're using the data from the industry that wants to do the fracking.
Exactly. That's making the money from doing the fracking. So I would say that you have to use all of their data with a grain of salt. So that's where we sit with the EPA. But the scientists aren't believing it. The scientists are not believing it.
Are the farmers for fracking? Because that would hurt the ag industry in Illinois. I mean, if you're polluting all the groundwater, and having these wells, I mean, you're polluting the environment.
Yeah, there's no question about it. So it's really a mixed bag here in Illinois, because many of the farmers that own the land on the top don't own the mineral rights. Someone else owns the mineral rights. Sometimes they were bought, hundred a year ago, and they were transferred, down family to family. So the farmers, some of them, do not own the mineral rights.
Interesting.
They're not very happy because what they get is thrown a couple $1,000s by the industry, and the industry pulls in thousands of trucks onto these pads.
And then they prevent them from farming then?
The pads are about 9 acres. Okay,
9 acres.
9 acres, thousands of trucks. They say that they get an easement onto these things. Oftentimes, they in the contracts, in the leases, they have put in fine print that they get to use the water from the farmer's aquifer, and so some of these cases end up in court. I want you to know that.
Well, I can see where they're depleting the water, they're contaminating the water.
Right.
So
and spills onto the land as well.
So that will affect the farmer to make a living.
That's exactly right. And there's one other thing for farmers that's really important, is the plummeting land values. As soon as they drop a drill, the land values can plummet 25 to 75%. So you could have a farm that was worth $500,000 and it could drop in value to $100,000
so
overnight.
I was reading some of your papers.
Yeah.
And maybe instead of a 2-year moratorium, maybe for all this research to be done, it may take 5 to 10 years to do this research to see what kind of effect it's going to have on the environment, because maybe a 1 or 2 year research will not be sufficient to do this research and to do it properly. Exactly. Because in Europe, if you mention in Germany, they just banned fracking altogether, and the European countries, they're very aggressive in protecting the environment.
That's
like
exactly
I was just reading also this morning is that they banned the pesticides and herbicides that are destroying the beehives. Mm-hmm. Now, we're not doing it here in America because the US EPA is studying that also. Now, it looks like they're studying it, and no one is doing anything about it.
That's exactly. That's why we want a moratorium. We want a timeout. We want a timeout.
How long of a moratorium?
Right. Our
5,
bill,
10, 15 years?
HB 3086 has a 2-year moratorium right now. Okay. And we thought that's what we could politically get. Yeah. And there's some science behind that. The EPA is doing a big study.
Are they?
Yeah, they actually are doing a big study.
Why did they come out with this report?
I know. We don't know. It's funny business. This is political funny business. Yeah. But they are actually doing a study about the water contamination and the water scarcity issue, the water usage. Sure. And that study is going to be out in 2014. 2014? Yes. And in Pennsylvania, because they've been fracked so heavy, then there's so much air pollution, so much toxicity from this thing, that they started a very, very large study. It's called the Geisinger Health System Study. Yes. And that study is going to be out in about a year. And also, there's one other thing, too. I don't know if you know, but Illinois has recently been mapped by a large consortium of universities for our subfault lines, for our seismicity zones. And it's called EarthScope. And they just collected a bunch of data. They're still in the middle of collecting it. And they're going to take a couple years to determine where, our real dangers are as far as earthquakes. So that's going to come out in a couple years. So there are a number of big studies that we think are absolutely, absolutely important to look at before we decide to move forward here in Illinois.
Now, you mentioned studies on the health side. Mm-hmm. Is one of the study on the health side, are they going to determine the people that are going to get sick? Will they know in a year or 2 years if these people have cancer or any other type of diseases that is from this fracking, from these toxic chemicals?
There are cancer clusters and respiratory disease and neurological disease already, clusters of them starting to form around fracking.
How long does this take
down in Texas
for them to make this survey? Because maybe it take about a year, 2 years, or 3 years for people to find out.
Right.
It takes time.
There's no question about it. They're not. The Pennsylvania study is not going to catch all of the people that are going to get sick in Pennsylvania, but they're already getting sick. And so this is a very, very, very large study, and it's looking at all as many Pennsylvanians as they can, comparing the people that are not in frack zones with the people that are in frack zones. So we think this is a very important health study. But certainly the health studies overall in all of the states will continue.
Well, I foresee that wherever these if it goes where it shows that it's going to be a health problem, that no one wants to live there. It'd be a barren area. I mean, if they're going to cover that large area, who wants to live in an area where it's going to cause diseases caused by these toxic chemicals? Look at this.
This is incompatible of life. Yeah. Because around every single one of these wells, a half mile, is the toxic zone, is the sick zone, 2,500 to 3,000 feet. So basically, this whole area is going to be incompatible with life. They are going to find that they have to move, and many of the farmers are moving. They're shuttering their farms, and they are moving from these areas because they can't take it. This entire area is turned into a big industrial zone. Yeah. There's compressors, and there's pipelines, and there's thousands of trucks. It's just literally going in and taking over our farmland and turning it into a huge industrial zone.
Now, you mentioned the bill HB 2615, where you mentioned that there was some environmental groups with industry behind closed doors.
Yes.
Now, what environmental groups are for it then? I mean, would they call themselves an environmental group if they're for and it's going to cause this kind of trouble?
So, So in New York, let me compare it to New York. New York, there is a huge anti-fracking movement because the New York City's drinking water is directly under attack by the frackers in northern New York. So they have access to all of these millions of people in New York, and they're up in arms about this. Okay, so they have been able to get a 5-year moratorium, and they're rolling.
5 year makes sense,
right? And they're rolling it over for 2 more years. There's a bill in their state house to roll it over for 2 more years. So they're still looking at the data. Okay, so but here in Illinois, what is happening is that it's this kind of isolated because it's small rural communities that are, fighting this fracking, that the fracking is going to come into. They, many of the elected officials say, we need the jobs. We need the jobs.
Well, if you mentioned that was in Virginia, they only created 900 jobs.
West Virginia.
A small amount of jobs with the amount of damage they do for water environment.
That's exactly right. And let me tell you the reality about that. So Food and Water Watch did a report, and they said that 1.7 jobs per well, that's it. One of the jobs is an out-of-state fracker that they're bringing in, okay? And the 0.7 job is a temporary trucker. Temporary meaning that they don't have health insurance, they don't have, it's a temporary trucker. And so that's why we can say that only 900 jobs were really created in West Virginia, because these out-of-state frackers come in and they basically change the entire economy of the local rural area, okay? They compete for housing. So a lot of times the people that are on fixed incomes like Social Security, they have to move out of these towns because the frackers are coming in, driving up the price of any rentals in the area.
For a short period of time.
For a short period of time, for a boom, and a bust, okay? For a short period of time, then they are, then the fracking happens, and also crime, drugs, prostitution, and the industry has said, they put out a report and they said that we think that there's going to be 1,000 to 47,000 jobs created in Illinois. And some of those jobs, they included the lap dancers. Now, I don't know if we should really include the lap dancers in our estimation of how many jobs. But we think it's going to be far closer to, 9,000, if we have 10,000 wells. So that 0.7 job per well. Temporary truck driver, okay? Now, another thing that happens to the communities is that they're really hit hard with some serious costs. All of these trucks destroy their roads. So they're hit hard with a lot of road repair. They also need emergency and fire personnel because there are blowouts. Where there's natural gas drilling, there are blowouts. Where there's oil drilling, there's blowouts. And, we saw a huge refinery just go up in flames in Detroit. Did you see that? I think it was 2 days ago. A huge refinery just went up in flames. So all of these communities are going to have to pour out money for this, and they're not going to get any money from the state back right away.
So stop fracking in Illinois. That's what you recommend?
Stop fracking in Illinois.
And protect our environment.
Exactly.
Protect the health and welfare of the public.
That's true.
And let's help the people in the southern part of Illinois because we're all together on this planet.
Absolutely. So let's encourage your state rep and senator to vote for HB 3086, a moratorium on fracking with an investigative task force. Thank you.
I will be